Hi, hello. So I'm Brian. It's amazing to be here at Dash today. So I realize it's a long day of presentations, so I'll try and keep this interesting. So this is a presentation about how we improved on-call at Intercom. So chances are, where you're working, they probably need their on-call improved too. And so hopefully this presentation can provide some inspiration and ideas. First of all, I'm going to try a bit of crowd engagement. Is anybody on call right now? Cool. So I don't know, maybe we can help out if you're paged. That could actually be a better idea for a talk. Like, just we all help out on some alert that just paged. Anyway, so I'm going to introduce myself and where I work. Then I'll talk about the problem with on-call that we solved and how and why we solved it. So if you've read the agenda already, there might be some spoilers in there. I also wrote a blog post about this, which some of you might have seen. So that has even more spoilers, but I've got some juicy new material to share today as well. So it's not all spoiled, even if you've come across that stuff before. So who am I? I work in Intercom's Dublin office in Ireland. So we have 3 engineering offices in Dublin, London, and San Francisco. Dublin's probably the primary engineering location, though we're hiring in all 3 locations. My background is very much in like fixing things. So my first job was doing Solaris technical support many years ago. Solaris is kind of like Linux except for banks during like the dot-com boom. And so I really enjoyed helping people out, learning Unix internals, networking, troubleshooting, fixing stuff. So skipping forward a few more years, I worked in Amazon, running like Amazon's DNS and load balancing infrastructure. So not the AWS services, they were kind of built while I was there. It's the stuff predating it and the stuff that AWS is built on top of. Even back then, Amazon was a reasonable sized company, but obviously AWS exploded while I was there. So I got to do a lot of really interesting work with people like fixing things and building things. Like on the retail website, in Kindle, and like with lots of different folks from AWS. And so I did a lot of on-call at Amazon, but I also like participated as a call leader, which is a virtual team of like-minded individuals tasked with resolving problems anywhere across Amazon. And at Intercom, Intercom's a lot smaller, but the work I'm doing is quite similar. So it's building things that break or try not to break, and building great teams to run these things which shouldn't break most of the time. And I help out where I can, organizing work and also running the cloud that I used to kind of run or something like that. So it's a lot easier to use the cloud on the outside than it is on the inside. So what is Intercom? Thanks to the internet, people communicate drastically differently than they did, 10, 20, even like 5 years ago. So these days, people use messengers like WhatsApp for their day-to-day lives. And that switch is happening in businesses too. So Intercom builds a suite of messaging products that allows internet businesses to accelerate growth through all parts of the customer lifecycle, through customer acquisition, engagement, and support. So a lot of the time what that means is we're at a little button at the bottom right-hand corner of your website, and you can talk to the business you're engaging with there. And there's a lot of other features in the back end for the business who are on the other side. So technology-wise, Intercom, we've had in my time there as a fast-growing engineering team. And we're built largely with like well-known core technologies. So Ruby on Rails application, we use a lot of MySQL, we build almost exclusively on top of AWS. So we try and use well-known existing technologies to us. So we'll not try and solve problems like novel problems or hard technical problems. We'll run as little software ourselves to keep us focused on our mission to make internet business personal. So we try and run as little software as possible and use other SaaS businesses to run our great services. So this is the background information. So I'm going to start by talking generally about on-call. So on-call is brilliant. So I loved on-call. It's been like an important part of my career and growth. And the on-call function itself in most businesses is like a perfect storm of technical challenges, ownership, deep responsibility for like serving your customers' requests or fixing things for your customers, as well as like continuous improvement for your organization and people. So being on call like connects you umbilically to your technical stack and to your customers. So if your customers can't use the software services that that they are doing to try to do their job, and you're on call and it's broken, you're doing something about it to fix it. So you're directly doing something that your customers can do. So that's great. This is really satisfying stuff. So being responsible for the delivery of the value that your business gives to customers, it's pretty thrilling. And satisfying to fix things. So like you get the endorphin rush for having brought up the service or saved the database or whatever. And so you get that nice immediate payoff and you can get to be a bit of a hero at times. So on-call can be good. But at the exact same time, on-call is also absolutely awful. It can make your life considerably worse than it was before you started doing on-call, especially if the organization that you're working for is not paying attention to like the quality of its operations and the quality of on-call. So, and fundamentally, nobody likes getting woken up in the middle of the night. So just the act of getting paged in the middle of the night can cause like physical and mental stress. I can still vividly remember the ringtone of the phone I had on Amazon in the first few years. They used to page me, and it's not in a good way. And even now, like despite having done, I don't know, hundreds of on-call shifts, I'm being pretty comfortable with our technical stack and Intercom and stuff, and years of experience in doing this stuff. And like I've got 2 young kids, and I run almost every single day, and there's loads of reasons why I should be able to sleep, but I still sleep badly whenever I'm on call. I'm just like wondering, did I miss a page, or I'm dreaming about servers going down or something. So there's opportunities here in on-call. You know, it's bad, and you get paged, and there's lots of learning opportunities, but like, when you get paged on something, there's also follow-up that needs to happen. You need to log a ticket and then dig into it maybe the next day. And this kind of follow-up and due diligence to all your alerts and that is, this is work that you didn't have to do beforehand. And so you have to build in enough slack to, your week when you're on call or your day when you're on call to be able to follow up things. And depending on like where things are at or what you're doing, this could cause some organizational slack. You might miss some commits you've made for that week, or not ship something that some other team was depending on. So this in itself can like cause you kind of personal grief to meet your own targets. And going on call makes you very aware of not just every technical problem that's happening in the company, but also like organizational problems. So this can become rapidly overwhelming because you pretty much get the viewpoint that everything is on fire all of the time, and it becomes difficult to see how you can even start to fix things. So examples of like organizational problems are like if you have a team who are not paying enough attention to their services or operations, or maybe they're not learning lessons from earlier outages, or they don't review their alerts methodically, or maybe even just their service is going through rapid growth and the systems aren't scaling, the implementation decisions that they made are no longer applicable, or they're at the edge of what the system was engineered for, or even worse, maybe the team whose stuff you're on call for, they got reorganized, they don't exist anymore. Well, now it's like your job to kind of figure out this stuff, and this can become demoralizing very rapidly. So, history lesson, on-call at Intercom. So on-call at Intercom grew organically over time. So Intercom has been a fast-growing startup in the history of its life. And so typically, with a lot of stuff in fast-growing startups, things just kind of happen, or things happen organically, and we can figure out things later when we get a bit bigger. The history of on-call is that when things started off as is kind of normal enough in small companies, like the founder or CTO did on-call. He was like Kieran, our CTO, he did the on-call. He kept things running. It was good. And as we grew, pretty early on, we started building out an infrastructure operations team. You know, we knew we were going to be all in on the cloud from pretty early on in Intercom's lifetime, and so we started basically building a team around Kieran and scaling out that function. So we had like a small infrastructure team who were the default team for on-call. But as we continue to grow, lots and lots of teams started to go on-call. So there's a culture of strong ownership in Intercom, which partly grew out of other people coming over from Amazon into Intercom as well, like myself. And this seemed to make sense at the time. We would grow a team, they would build a thing, and then they would go on call for the thing. And so this is good. Putting developers on call for the stuff that they build is pretty powerful, because it really does, it gets the right people looking at alerts, it gets the right people looking at these things, and you don't have a lot of communication overhead with having to hand over stuff to new teams and that kind of thing. So we had the infrastructure team still being like the catch-all team for a bunch of shared services and databases. And then we had all the sort of lowish level product teams who were dealing with like product concerns and features and building out data stores and services to operate all that stuff. So, but we just kind of drifted into this. There was no plan as such here. Teams did it, it was good, kind of worked. And like the kind of problems that the teams were dealing with was like, say our email delivery team, they need to know if we're on a bunch of spam blacklists or if the data stores that they built are still working. The user data storage team needs to know if MongoDB is down, which has been for a bit. And so this all set up. There was like real on-call operational problems to happen here, but still there were problems in this. So kind of like the proverbial frog in boiling water, we did, unlike the proverbial frog, we did notice some problems. So there were too many people on call. So like we probably had like 6 or 7 people on call over a weekend, with various degrees of how serious their on-call shift was. So some teams were paged a lot, they were well rehearsed in like being online, being ready to go. Other teams were paged infrequently, but they still kind of had a pager which would directly page an engineer. So, but there was still too many people who, on a Friday, they go off, and they'd be somewhere thinking in the back of their head, I might get paged, I shouldn't go swimming with the kids or whatever. So the number of people on call for Intercom seemed to be mismatched for the scale of our operations and size of the business. Like in comparison to, say, when I was working at Amazon, say the amount of people who'd be on call for a small service like S3 or something like that. It was kind of in that kind of order. We also noticed that we had inconsistent operational quality between teams. So because all these things kind of grew organically and on an ad hoc basis, a bunch of people knew like what good alarms should look like. Other teams wouldn't necessarily have the kind of operational background or experience with things, or maybe they did and they just didn't prioritize this stuff. So it's completely okay for teams to take the eye off kind of the operational, the day-to-day operations and kind of go by the seat of their pants a bit. We also noticed that there was a high tolerance for out-of-hours pages. Teams seemed to be okay of like knowing if there was an alert spike or an error spike on their service or something, and engineers would get the page and kind of acknowledge it, and they'd follow up with the team on Monday and stuff like that. But it wasn't a big deal to get paged. And in reality, it is a big deal, and you have to have a zero tolerance policy towards these kind of things. So, in the quality thing as well, like we had inconsistent approaches to, say, documentation and alarming. Some alarms had runbooks, most did not. And all of these kind of problems led to a very different engineer experience between teams. You could end up on, say, the email delivery team, and suddenly you've got a lot of on-call, and it needs to be taken quite seriously. But the previous week, you might have been working on, say, a front-end team, which didn't have the same on-call responsibilities. So this, in effect, becomes like a barrier to engineer and organizational fluidity. Intercom's a fast-growing company, and so we want engineers to be able to switch teams without a lot of frictions. We can organize things depending on how things are changing, how the priorities of the business are changing and that. So this kind of inconsistency stuff made it just a bit of a barrier, because there were certain folks who may not want to do on-call due to completely normal life reasons or preferences and where they're and what they want to do, and it didn't feel good like keeping those people away from those kind of teams where they could have some great impact. So the variance of on-call experience and expectations across team was a problem, and we wanted to get away from the mix of best effort and kind of professional on-call teams. In short, on-call was eating our engineers. We were reducing our productivity. Our engineers weren't be able to be as impactful. We couldn't move people around as easy. And so it's a lot of fun building stuff in this kind of scrappy startup fashion, and keeping things running by the seat of your pants is fun and all. But like Intercom, we kind of transitioned out of that phase, and we were moving more towards a place where we want a sustainable, rewarding environment to be part of. So let's try to fix this. So these slides make this look super easy, and like this is months of work. So we built a virtual team of volunteers. So we asked our engineering organization for volunteers and maybe prompted a few people to go forward. And we started thinking about the problem at hand. So we started from first principles, like why even have on-call? Do we need on-call? Like, unfortunately, we couldn't get away from having on-call. So once we accepted this, we started figuring out like what are the values that we were starting to apply, and what are the kind of goals and things we could measure that would show whether the things we do are successful or not. So we started to build a bit of a plan together, and we wrote standards and processes effectively to describe what an alarm is, how an alarm can get moved from a team into this new virtual team, what these alarms should look like. So, we gave guidance around not alerting on kind of low-level maybe symptoms or maybe things that have alerted in the past but aren't representative of real, true customer experience. And also, it wasn't just that the customer experience had to be degraded for us to alert on something. It also had to be actionable. So, for example, a 5-minute spike on our most important API of errors, that's important. It's customer impacting. And we do want to know about it, but we don't need to get somebody out of bed about it just because a database failed over correctly, gave a bunch of spikes in errors, and then repaired itself. We don't need to know about those things. We don't need to get people out of bed. So the questions we had were pretty tough. They were, is this actionable, and is this meaningful? We also built out like a Terraform pipeline to control our alarms. So we put our alarms in configuration to Terraform, and this meant that we had a programmatic control, or like we were able to use the Git flow for reviews of alarms, and so we had a change control over what alarms changed and when and why. It made it very quickly auditable as well, so we weren't clicking around the Datadog UI to kind of figure out what the status of things were or when things changed. We had it all nicely in a GitHub repository. So that made things easier to review, made the process of handing over the reviews to the new team dependent on approvals and that kind of thing. And it's just generally a good thing to kind of socialize decision-making behind why certain alarms are at different thresholds and that. So this was like one of the technology things we did, but really wasn't necessary for the rollout of this, but it was a nice thing we did at the same time. And so we took over the alarms. This again was a lot easier to write than it was to do. So we had to like set teams some deadlines, and we worked with our leadership team to make it an organizational priority. So we got like great buy-in from engineering leadership, why we were doing it, and the outcomes. So they gave us unwavering support on this, which helped a lot. And teams also like were pretty enthusiastic to get things over. Though it was a lot of work because we had new standards about runbooks, about documentation, about whether these alarms should exist at all, and there was some re-engineering of some things that had to go over to get these services into a state of where a new engineer who has no deep knowledge of the service itself can go on call for these things. So we forced teams to, in effect, write documentation and runbooks that they did kind of want to write, but didn't necessarily do it at the time. And so I have to kind of say this, like we did this mostly, like this was all Dublin-based engineers, so we were all able to kind of collaborate and do this kind of quickly and locally. So the out of our hours on call team, what are kind of attributes or things that are about it? So these are the juicy details. So outside of office hours, outside of Dublin office hours, the virtual on-call team gets every single page. During office hours, the on-call, the teams themselves gets the pages for the stuff that they break. This actually means that they get most of the pages. So when developers are pushing out code, when we're making changes to our infrastructure. This all stuff generally happens in office hours. So this way we do actually get the people who operate the services and build the services experiencing most of the pain of running their stuff. So we don't detach people away from the services that they're building. Also, we encourage the product teams that when they're on call for the services during office hours to follow the runbooks that they've written for the on-call team externally. It's also pretty convenient as well that when Dublin is awake, it tends to be the case that that's when we're going through our biggest traffic ramp every single day. We're largely a business-facing business, not consumer. And so that generally means like when Europe start waking up in the morning and then the East Coast of America starts waking up in the morning, and then at the West Coast at the end of the day, Dublin's there for that entire time. So like if something's going to break, it usually breaks during office hours. And so as a member of the virtual team, you go on call for a week. This week starts from Friday evening to Friday morning. You can talk a lot about exactly when this kind of schedule should finish and end. You can bike shed it for hours. This works okay. I mean, there's probably other schedules that could work as well. But 1 week was good enough to get enough context for stuff that's going on. It's also not so long that you're going to be taken out of action from your team for ages. And you got the weekend off before the week, your week following your on-call shift to kind of relax and get back into a normal state of mind in case you had a particularly bad shift. So this works for us, though there's lots of ways to do this. So the team consists of about 6 or 7 engineers. So we consider like membership of this virtual team to be like a tour. You're basically kind of committing to doing, say, about 3 or 4 of these shifts when you're on the virtual team for 6 months. And then we want people to move off the team. So you join the team, last for about 6 months, and then leave the team. Obviously not everything goes well. The way we think about the duty of the on-call engineer is that you're a first responder. You know, you're not a surgeon, or you're not somebody who's got necessarily a lot of experience with the systems that you're dealing with. Your job is to stop the bleeding, like perform CPR. I'm not sure how far to go with this metaphor, but like basically deal with the issue that can be resolved with first aid and general knowledge. So, and to take the stress away, we don't want the on-call engineer to have to decide how to escalate, where to escalate to, figure out who to engage. So we go through like a secondary rotation of an on-call, like an engineering leader. And that person's job is to take the stress away from the first person. So first, the on-call engineer gets paged. They're not clear about what next steps are, or they're not making progress, or even just for any reason, they've got a single path of escalation. There's no ambiguity here. It's engage the on-call engineering leader. So this is like level 2 escalation, takes away the stress for like what to do next. Adds in possibly a little bit of delay here or latency, but we're hoping that this will work well, and it has so far. So at that point, the on-call engineering leader then figures out, okay, is this worth escalating for? Like, should we actually bring in the team who are responsible for the service or whatever? And then from that point, we escalate further over to typically through the manager of that team. And so the manager of the team will have context about, say, maybe something deployed that day, or maybe there's a specific person that we should call on a best effort basis to bring in. So this is like best effort from here. We're kind of relying on judgment, we're relying on people being available, and there's no obligation to take these calls or to be on call. But typically, we've generally managed to get people into enough people around to kind of fix a problem. From the product team engineering manager goes to the engineers, kind of bat signal. We kind of page everybody, just say, hey, if you're awake, it'd be cool if you could join this call or whatever. So this escalation thing kind of hasn't been used as much as we thought it would be, but it's the kind of system we put in place. And so we remunerate for each shift. So there's a set fee you get for the shift that you did for your week of work. And we kind of, we don't force people to rest, but we kind of expect people to rest, especially if they were paged in the middle of the night or their time or travel was disrupted. We do want people to be rested for the rest of the week or during their time. So there's been some unexpected things that have come out of this. So all of this kind of started working and paid a lot of attention to it. And then there's some things that kind of didn't go as well or went differently to the way we planned. So the formal escalation chain I just mentioned actually was quite uncommon. What has happened in practice has been more informal escalations. A page goes off, it's visible in Slack, and a lot of these pages happen during, say, San Francisco business hours, and some of the engineers in San Francisco might just start to chip in and help out. Equally, just because of the visibility on Slack and because people are awake or whatever, they'll just kind of hop in and prevent a lot of the formal escalations through the L2 process, and kind of in effect kind of weakens that escalation process. Like escalation processes are only as powerful as if they're used frequently. But what this did mean is like we're building kind of a small community of people who are engaged and helping out in these kind of events. So it's kind of unexpected, but nice to see this kind of happen. And we've built up a lot of more operational knowledge across the org, especially from the San Francisco office, than we kind of expected, or we didn't anticipate this going into it. Teams took strong ownership of the issues, so we mandatorily open at the highest severity issue for every single page. And we kind of had a carrot and stick approach, or we thought we might need to do a carrot and stick approach of handing alarms back to teams if they fail to take action or if they refuse to take action or whatever. In reality, this hasn't happened. We opened the highest priority issue, and then the teams have taken really strong ownership for like addressing the root cause. And we might chip in with like advice or reasons or guidance, whatever, but we just haven't had to deploy the stick. The carrot of having on-call team do your on-call for you is enough. So that was like really positive and went better than we kind of had planned as well. Also, there's like some sort of social stigma about paging somebody outside of your own team. When it's your own team, I don't know, it's like you treat your family members different from your friends or something, but like it seems to be tolerable to page your own team for something or to have these pages go to your own team. When it's someone who's like remote from you, you feel more guilty or something. So yeah, it's kind of weird. People treat people outside their team better than they do inside the team. So it's maybe, yeah, it's kind of unexpected. So we had a lot of good things, which is nice. The system worked. The number of pages dropped month over month. So we kind of had consistently a few months of less than 10 pages. Like some of that's related to like just work that's going on and some improvements we were making. But the main point is like we removed a lot of junk alarms and we improved the quality of the alarms that were coming through the system. So just the sheer act of taking alarms, reviewing them, having people in this chain, and then paying attention to the stuff that is alarming, that in itself just reduced the amount of alarms massively. It reduced the amount of alarms that existed, never mind the ones that were causing pages. So we had good metrics, good outcome, kind of consistent lower pages, which is a good thing. We also, we saw the low-value paging alarms destroyed, so a lot less kind of symptoms getting paged on, a lot less like swap on a Memcache instance, that kind of stuff. We just started paging more on the high-level customer-facing symptoms. And also the rotation thing worked, so we kind of worried a bit that we would form this team of a bunch of volunteers and then no one else would volunteer. Thankfully, people did, but we had to take care to kind of rotate people in and out, so it wasn't a big bang rotation that like a B team coming in or something, that we were bringing people in and phasing them out over kind of constantly. And so that's actually worked reasonably well, and we've had a lot of people interested in joining the team. As I mentioned earlier, the SF engineers were kind of getting involved in kind of a bunch of day-to-day stuff and give events and that. And so we were able to establish basically the team and work closely with, or get the virtual team spreading across both offices. And that's just great for a bunch of organizational or cross-office interactions. You got the specific virtual team, bunch of work that you're doing with each other. It just builds great social connections and builds more capacity to just kind of work in the SF office, which is really good. There's more good things. One of the things we do is send out monthly comms to the engineering team, how things are going, what things paged, what lessons I've learned, a bunch of stuff that were in these slides. And we get good feedback about this stuff. So it's nice being able to talk about this work. It's nice being able to explain how all of OnCall is working out for the entire organization to the engineering team and get good positive feedback about things. We just see all these small kind of social approval of this team and the work involved in it. So membership of the team is referred to in performance reviews and anniversaries, and you just see it dotted around the place. So people are kind of conscious of rewarding or knowing that this thing is valuable, that this function is valuable, and when people participate in the team, it's kind of socially backed up through these kind of public demonstrations of our gratitude for people being involved in this team. So that's good to see and really positive. So as part of, I was able to write this as part of a job spec for a systems engineering role. It was really satisfying that I was able to say, just because you're in a systems engineering role on our team doesn't mean that you're doing mandatory on-call. So, at the moment, I think there's one person on our systems engineering team who's part of the virtual team. It's just nice to be able to have roles and advertise them for systems engineering, which is generally aligned with being on call, and almost assume that there's some on-call elements in this, because this opens up the role to kind of more diverse candidates, or there's people who might be interested in having on-call be less part of their work. So yeah, sorry about the we're hiring pitch, but this was a nice little story. And I wrote a blog post about this I mentioned previously, so it's easily Googleable if you go to blog.intercom.com. So some takeaways. So I'm going to recap some points. Any on-call setup anywhere, I think it's open to challenging. On-call is kind of one of those things where you can set up a bunch of alarms and just kind of accrue a bunch of technical data such. And just the way you go about it through your who is on call and where they're doing on call, what they're doing on call for, and everything. I think it's one of these things which are kind of it can be disrupted in your own team. So I think be radical and just kind of question the nature of your on call setup, as there's some really positive takeaways you can get, or some really positive improvements you can get. So by all means, don't do on-call and hurt your customers and SLAs. I think to have confidence to do this kind of work, you need to understand who your customers are, what their pain points are, what the SLAs are for, the different things you're doing. But the main point is to, once you have that in mind and you're aware of this stuff, optimize on-call for your people. So applying the concept of human ops. So your computers, they're not great, but your humans are the things that will build your company around, so optimize for them. And so it's not that we're trying to hurt your customers and SLAs, but the humans are the things that you can optimize for. And this whole setup I described here, it's the application of continuous improvement. And so we have a mechanism, which is this virtual team, and that we have processes that review alarms and take things through a process. And all of this buys focus and time to build more product. It kind of matures things, and ultimately it's a lever for continuous improvement in your organization. So do not let on-call eat your engineers. Thank you. Any questions?
You mentioned you have two in time on call. How do you, does that mean that one of them is the primary and one is the second? They get paid at the same time?
Sure, so the question is, do we have two people on call, and then what's the setup? So the level 2 on-call we have is strictly a kind of management on-call, so it's escalation only. So there's no technical expectation of that second person. It's purely to take escalations and really to figure out next steps, to take the pressure of the organizational aspects of okay, will we engage further and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not a kind of classic primary, secondary technical on-call. It's single primary and an escalation on-call.
Yeah, so you said your secondary on-call is like semi-best effort. I'm curious what you mean by that, because in my experience, best effort means you won't get them.
Yeah, so we haven't had too many bad experiences. So it's best effort in that there's no one whose job it is to be like obligated to be on call. So we have a high expectation or high standards that we expect of the person who is on call. They need to make sure that their shifts are being covered. If they need to do an errand, or if they're going to go to the shops, they should have their laptops with them. That kind of they should be available and on call within a tight enough time. But for the rest of the folks, we kind of rely on their good judgment around being available and just not forcing teams to do their own mandatory on call for as an escalation. So to a certain extent, we're kind of winging this. We've had 1 or 2 incidents of where it would have been nicer to have some other people around to kind of help out with things, but we haven't been hurt too badly by it. So again, I guess it depends on the nature of the problems that are coming in, the kind of appetite for risk in the organization, and also we're kind of fortunate because we move people around, teams around reasonably frequently. So there tends to be people online or enough people around who have some familiarity, which aren't on a specific team. So, is that good? Okay.
What kind of resources do you provide for the people who are on call so they know what to do when they get a call? Do they get context? Is there a knowledge base, or how does that work?
So they have in every single page that comes in through PagerDuty, there's a runbook or a link to a runbook in that. And there's supposed to be enough there to make progress. So the runbooks, the guidance we have to give teams are runbooks should be written, but to be usable by somebody who's familiar-ish with the system, somebody who works for Intercom, but not necessarily familiar with the workings of it. So the steps have to be pretty clear, and you need to be able to do simpler enough actions before you reach a point of having to escalate. So really we rely on that. We rely on not quite fully automatable steps, but a number of steps that allows the engineer who just got paid to get their bearings, understand what the system's going on, and then it gives them options or gives them choices of what to go and do after that. So that's about it.
Exists in order to have an alert?
Yeah, so that having that runbook in the alarm is one of the standards that I talked about to be handed over. And we're trying to regularly review the runbooks as well and get feedback from the engineers who are actually dealing with the runbooks when the pages do come in. So in addition to the high priority issues that we'll open for the teams after an event, we might open some lower priority ones of hey, this runbook refers to our old wiki system or whatever. So we try and continually improve those things as well. Anyone else? Cool.
I had a couple questions. The first one is, what do you do if there's if nobody's opting in or volunteering to do on call?
Well, we haven't had that problem. We considered it, what to do if we've done all this work, we create this team, and we don't get kind of interest in it. I guess the whole thing falls apart. I wouldn't be giving this talk. I guess we do reward the work, and we rely on the kind of social pressure or something, or social rewards for doing this kind of work. So when it's meaningful in say performance reviews and meaningful in promotions and stuff like that, we want to provide the right kind of incentives and motivation for people to get involved. We're fortunate we do have a big ownership culture in the company, and so we do kind of hire for that sort of thing as well. So we've been lucky to be able to tap into a pool of very interested engineers. including like engineers who aren't like systems or operational backgrounds who just want to get involved and do more stuff. So yeah, I guess if this starts falling apart, I don't know, I guess we could hire a whole team for it, but that seems against like the spirit of this whole exercise. So okay, wrap it up. Okay, thank you all.